Good morning, and welcome back to another episode of the Closer's Inner Circle podcast, hosted by your partner in Success Radio. I am your host, Denise Griffitts, and together with my esteemed co-host, Ben Gay III, and I said that just to drive him crazy, we're diving into the world of sales mastery with the gem from the Closers Part 2. Now, these books, Parts 1 and 2, are widely known across the globe as the Sales Bibles. Pay attention to that, it's important. They are known as the Sales Bibles. So today on the podcast, we dive back into a fascinating conversation discussion about the sales infiltration chapter of the Closers Part 2. Now, if you don't already know this, Ben Gay III is highly regarded, excuse me, as one of the top sales trainers in the world, and his teachings have positively impacted many careers and businesses. Excuse me, I'm coughing and losing my voice, but I'm going to power through it. So the Closers Part 2, Sales Infiltration, is located on page 257. And we've been talking about this chapter for a while now, I think about a year. And we finally meandered around and got to it, but it offers tactical advice that can greatly enhance your sales strategy and your outcomes. So over the next episode or two, and we've already done two, Ben will share his strategies for building strong rapport with prospects and closing more deals. And his practical wisdom will give you a new perspective and a competitive edge. So whether you're experienced in sales or just starting out, these episodes are full of valuable insights. So get ready to learn from Ben Gay III and enhance your sales skills. It's Wednesday. Good morning, Ben. It's my favorite day of the week.
Good morning. It has become my favorite day of the week also, as I think I told you last week. One, I get to do this show with you every Wednesday. And two, I can tell it's hump day because Wednesday, if I'm in town, is when I put the trash out.
Yeah, I
So
remember being slightly offended by you equating me to the trash pickup.
it's two landmarks in my miserable little life.
I'm over it now. I forgive you. But we have talked about this chapter so many times during our discussions, both on and offline. And there are so many important takeaways or lessons from it. So we've got a lot to cover because I think we probably have another couple of episodes at least to keep digging into this particular chapter. So, what are we talking about today?
Well, before we get officially rolling, let me drop in an idea. Somebody mentioned to me the other day, I didn't have your website and I had to listen to the whole show. And I said, well, that's not a bad thing, but I had to listen to the whole show to get it. So let's put a bumper up front on this show and I'll tell them how to reach me and you tell them how to reach you and we can do it again at the end. Is that okay?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's easy to find us. Just go to yourpartnerinsuccessradio.com. We're there every week.
And the books we're talking about are from the Closers series. Uh, Denise is about to contribute the Closers Part 4 to the family. So I look forward to telling everybody about that. In the meantime, the books in the Closers series, including the Closers Part 2, which we're tending to teach from currently, is you can get your copy with special pricing and free domestic shipping, meaning the United States, uh, at stores, stores, dot ebay.com/Ronzoni books, RONZONE books, BOOKS, Ronzoni books, of course, being one word. And when you order from them, they bring them to me before they ship them for signing, so they'll still be signed and dated, which is sort of how you can tell where something really came from. If I don't date, even the ones that go to Amazon, I don't date because I don't know when they're going to sell them. So I sign most of them. But if you want them signed, dated, and guaranteed, that's where you go. Stores.ebay.com/Ronzoni books. If you order by 2 o'clock any business day, they go out that day. So you get them pretty quick. We had an order the other day come in on Friday and he got it on Monday all the way across the country. which even impressed me. He said, I got my books. And I looked down at the ledger and I thought, wow, I'll try not to act surprised. But wow, that was just media mail postage.
Nice.
Anyway, we have a question today that was emailed to me from a Ray Piven. And Ray wanted to know, and this is a great question for you and me, because I think I can do half of it pretty well, and you can do the other half better than I could. His question is, uh, I'll have to paraphrase it because I don't think it was written as clear as it could have been, but he wants to know if a good host is what makes a podcast excellent, or is it a good guest? Yeah, and it was
Both.
sort of phrased as an either either. So you go ahead.
Oh, it's definitely both. It very much is both. And I think you have mentioned before that a good podcast host can kind of guide the conversation and keep you out of, the deep waters if you go off track, which can happen very easily. But it's both. I mean, and I've shared this with you, and anybody who knows me knows this, but you cannot come on my podcast unless you do a pre-interview with me, and it's 15 minutes. It's no big deal. And every once in a while, somebody will say, "Well, I don't have time." Well, thank you. Thank you for your interest. You have a nice day now. You hear? And when you say that in the South, that means go away. I'm not going to talk to you anymore. But
Bless your heart.
bless your heart. But the thing is, and I had 5, 6 of these yesterday, and I lost my voice on the sixth one. But one guy was saying, I told my assistant I was not going to do pre-interviews, and here I am. And I said, why is that? He said, because I listened to your podcast. There you have it.
Mhm.
So, and I thought, okay, that was a good response. But he was adamant, I'm not doing any pre-interviews. And I kind of said, well, do you want to shut it down now? He said, no, 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 don't go away. But that's where the magic happens for me. I have an opportunity to get to know you, listen to you, get comfortable with you. You have the same opportunity with me. And a lot of podcast hosts don't think about this, I don't think, but we all get the same information. We all get the same pitch. We all get the same speaker or podcast one sheet that really tells us about your topics, but not much else. It doesn't give us, there's no nuance there. We cannot determine how you're going to show up on our shows. So pre podcast it is. And I mean, I'm adamant about that. I draw the line in the sand there. The answer's no. If you won't do it, can't do it. And I've had some big names that y'all wouldn't, you'd know who they were. Say, well, I want to come on, but I don't have time. Well, let me know when you do.
we, we can work it out in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. You
Uh,
have a nice day now, you hear?
for those people thinking about hosting a podcast, good news again, the closers part 4 that Denise is writing as we speak is about podcasting and how it fits into the modern sales world, etc. And in casual conversation, before Ray asked this question, I asked her because the pre-interview was necessary, even with me, and we'd become friends and agreed to have me co-host the Wednesday show. She still, before I was on the Wednesday show, wanted to do a pre-interview. And I'll have to admit, I thought, well, it's fine, but
I'm
why?
special. Why do I have to do this?
Yeah. And part of
But
that
that's where
is
the magic happens. That's where we nailed down what we were going to do.
right. And so, one, if you're thinking about doing a podcast, like Denise does, and so many other people are doing, put that in your notes. Uh, a good host can guide things and save things and so on. And the pre-interview saves you perhaps from bringing on someone that you'd have to save or they have nothing of interest really to say. And I've encountered a few of those in the host role where they were the host. They had not, I thought, okay, you're on your own. You know, they're not going to ask any interesting questions. They don't know who you are. They have, and that also ties into low listenership or viewership. So there's a whole lot of reasons you want to do it, but do the pre-interview that Denise insists on. It's right. It also sets the table. It starts drawing the lines in sales infiltration, which we'll get to momentarily. In sales infiltration, I talk about setting the table. In other words, like Denise just said, oh, I don't have time to do it. Okay, well, have a great day. So that makes it rather clear if you're ever going to be on the show, you're going to do a pre-interview.
And you'll
And
like it.
yeah, and
Honest, this is the God's honest truth. I'm not bragging, but I have had so many people right after, we'll get them scheduled. I send them out the first email. There's a series of emails. I keep it simple, stupid. And I'll get a note back and say, Denise, that was so much fun. I can't wait. And they're
excellent.
already out there saying, I'm going to be on Denise's show. They're excited because they've had the opportunity to get to know me and know how I'm going to operate and how I'm going to care for them while they're on my show.
Precisely. And my half of that, we've sort of covered both halves, but my half of that is as a guest, and I've been a guest on hundreds of podcasts. A good host makes it so much easier and so much more interesting because there's a tendency to say the same thing over and over again, especially if all the host did was go through the little package of material we send out. Where were you born? Stuff that nobody really cares, semi-interesting, but nobody really cares about it and goes down the checklist. But when I get on with a good host like you are, Denise, and a couple of other excellent people, one that comes to my mind is Mark Tassani, who wrote The Closers Part 5.
Right.
Uh, I was blown away by his sales intellect and his interview skills. In fact, I told him after we did our thing, I said, package that up, put a price on it, and sell it. That's not just another podcast. That one is excellent. And most of it was due to him, frankly, because he asked interesting questions. My rule, I'll answer any question you have the nerve to ask anyone. But if you don't ask good questions, we're not going anywhere. So you've got to make it more interesting. This chat reminds me of getting on an airplane. I may have mentioned this before, getting on an airplane and somebody came up to me. I was just getting ready to sit down and said, Mr. Gay, would you sign my book? And I said, wow, sure. And the flight had nothing to do with the book. He just recognized me and had a book he was reading. So The Closers Part 1, I think. So I signed it for him. And then when I went to sit down, the guy sitting next to me, first row in first class, was the drummer with an old rock band. And he said to me, are you in show business? And I said, no, I wanted to be, but I had no talent of any kind. So I've had to become a public speaker and a writer. He said, all right. And he said, I'm used to having people come up and ask for autographs. And I thought maybe you were in show business. And I said, why are they asking for your autograph? He said, well, I'm a drummer in an old rock band. And I said, what's the name of the band? He said, Three Dog Night.
Oh, geez.
So we
Even
started.
I know who that is.
Yeah, I can't. His name is Lee. He's been the drummer for I think 40 years, and maybe one other one. Everybody else in the band has transitioned over the years. It's sort of like the Oak Ridge Boys. There's no one in the Oak Ridge Boys who was there to start with, but
Oh,
they've maintained it. It's a corporation with changing parts.
well, that
So
makes sense.
anyway, about hosting and asking good questions and so on. So trying to be polite because I knew Jeremiah was a bullfrog and two or three other, I said hum sum. I wasn't real sure which songs were Three Dog Night. And so after we chatted for a while, and I said, tell me, do you play just the oldies or do you play any new stuff? He said, well, we play some new stuff. They have to go to the bathroom. Thank you. Yeah. Here's one you've never heard before. 25 seconds later, the toilets start flushing.
Right. And the lights are, undimmed and everybody can find their way out to
Yeah.
oh God,
So,
that is
and sitting
funny.
across the way was the new guy in the band, the keyboard player. I forget what his name was. I didn't really get a chance to talk to him, but it was cute because Lee was sort of looking down his nose at him. He'd only been with him 3 or 4 years, so he was
Oh,
the new guy
yeah,
who
the new
carried.
new person in the village, nobody cares. You're still a foreigner.
Yeah. It's like me in this little town of Placerville. I've lived here now for 50 years, and I still hear people say, I don't know. That's Gigi Ronzoni's husband, because her family's been here 100 years, and I'm still what they call a flatlander. That means somebody down off the foothills of the
Oh,
Sierras,
oh, that is too
Bay
funny.
Area, whatever. That a flatlander is not a fond term with someone. It means they just got here. And 50 years apparently isn't the break point.
No, and
So
it's worse in England. That's much, much, much worse, I'm told.
if you have a punchline you want to take away, ladies and gentlemen, from this morning thing, remember what the drummer of Three Dog Night said. Yes, they play new stuff because they have to go to the bathroom. The audience has to go to the bathroom. And that
They're
just
paying
struck me.
attention to their audience.
Yeah, I've been giving I have a 10-day version and a 1 hour version and everything in between, but I've been giving basically the same talk with a few new nuggets here and there for many, many years. Cabot Robert, the founder of the modern day uh, public speaking industry, he was one of the three of us that formed the National Speakers Association. I asked him one time, Cabot, you give the same speech every time. It has different titles. There were 50 titles you could pick from, but whatever you hired him to do, he gave the same talk. And he said, Ben, it's easier to get a new audience than to get new material. And if you hit on good stuff, you shouldn't change it. The truth is the truth. If this is what works, keep doing it. And so I try and remember that on from time to time. I get tired of hearing myself, oh, that reminds me of this. And I think, oh God, I've got to tell that story again. When who's the guy with the glasses, Englishman, wild and crazy, um, Crocodile Rock.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, you do,
I
but like
do.
me, you're not thinking of it. Rhinestone glasses, blonde
Oh,
hair.
Elton John.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
I
I'm
think
not a
that's right.
fan, just so you know. Never
They
was, never
said
have been.
he said something about, are you ever going to retire? I think he's been on his farewell tour for about 6 years now. And he said, like Sophie Tucker, you have to be old to remember that one, but Sophie Tucker was an old vaudevillian, and she decided to retire and went on her farewell tour, which lasted until her death 24 years after it started.
Oh my goodness.
So anyway, Elton John was asked, what do you look forward to about retirement? He said, never having to sing Crocodile Rock again.
I don't know why I was never a fan. It was just wasn't my style of music for some
Yeah,
reason.
he's
Now,
a showman though. It's like Liberace and
yeah, that's what I
various
understand.
people. They're fascinating to watch work. As Johnny Carson said to Little Richard, the great rock and roll player who dressed flamboyantly and gave full credit to Liberace and Gorgeous George, the wrestler, and people who had gone before him. He said, Richard, does your wife like the way you dress? He said, no, but she likes the way she eats.
Well, I didn't know he was married.
Uh,
I
he,
think I just assumed he wasn't for
yeah, that
some
would be a
odd reason.
logical assumption. Uh, but I'm repeating what he was asked and what he said. I don't know which, if any of the parts were made up, but I love that. She likes the way she eats. Gigi is asked occasionally, is it interesting to be married to him? He walks into a restaurant, announces he's there, knows half the people before he sits down, the other half before he leaves. And she said, well, it's a little embarrassing sometimes, but we get very good service.
There's always a perk. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's always something good that comes out of almost everything.
yeah.
I love
So
that.
anyway, a good host can make the show, obviously a good guest. Your first word you said when you heard Ray's question was the right answer. Both,
Both. Right.
preferably working in harmony. And make a note, if you're ever going to have a podcast, ladies and gentlemen, do the pre-interview. No matter what they say, do the pre-interview, because something will pop up. You'll get comfortable with each other. You don't spend the first 10 minutes getting to know each other. That should be handled up front. By the
Absolutely.
time Denise and I did our first show together, we were old friends. Hadn't met
Were. That was
physically.
many years ago.
Yeah. So that's the answer, Ray Piven. Don't whine and complain if it wasn't the answer you didn't want to hear, because it's sort of ambiguous. But both is the answer. And for the guest, it is just wonderful when you have confidence. Shelley Berman, the old comedian, used to say when he got on an airplane back when that was unusual, people didn't fly around like they do now. He said he wanted to see the pilot with gray at the hair, gray at the temples on his hair. He wanted to see a crushed captain's hat because it's had earphones over it for so many years. He wanted to see wrinkles at the eye from gazing into the sun for 10,000 hours of documented flying. He said, what I really want is the feeling that daddy's going to take us flying.
You're in safe hands.
And as a host, I believe your daddy, male or female, daddy's going to take us flying is really crucial. And then because you're doing your show all the time, I'm talking to everybody, not you, Denise, because you're doing your show all the time, you're comfortable and you know what's going to happen. They don't. Don't create, don't send the link late so they come on with their heart beating, afraid they weren't going to be there in time. Don't not have the pre-interview so that you spend the first 10 minutes going, oh, hi, my name is Ben. What's yours? And so on. And don't be, here's a little side one, in my opinion. Don't be blown away by the popularity or fame of whoever you're talking to. They put their pants on one leg at a time. They've got problems you don't know about. They've been through things you don't know about. And the fact they're having their moment in the sun now probably won't last forever. It definitely will not last forever. But in the meantime, they're going to have their ups and downs too. I've been rich, I've been poor. As Pearl Bailey said, rich is better. So
Rich.
I've been on both ends of that. You want to talk about, I never filed for bankruptcy because I didn't have the money to pay the lawyer to I forget what it was, $3,500, but this is back when that was 35,000. He said, the fee is this. I said, if I had that kind of money, I wouldn't be filing for bankruptcy. Are you crazy? But it's something that I will talk about openly and do your audience good if you ask. But to ask, you've got to really pay attention, be uh, a dynamic listener, as Nelson Mandela was referred to as, and have an acute awareness. Uh, Even though you may or may not be on camera, you may not be able to see them, you have an acute awareness. On this comes on both sides, that something has gone right or wrong, or you're really rolling. And all of that's in selling.
I
That's
was just going to say, I was going to interrupt you,
yeah,
sorry, to say what you're talking about has everything to do with sales and marketing and podcasting and basically just how relatable you are. How are you,
exactly.
how are you coming across to the consumers of your books, of your podcast, of your blogs, do they want to hire you? Can they stand you or not? It's all part and parcel of one thing, sales.
Yep. The in On page 261 of the closers part two, sales infiltration. If you don't have your copy of the book, get them. It can make you a lot of money. But it talks about uh, if you want to make money in selling, one, get in selling, two, uh, make lots of sales calls. It's a numbers game to a degree, and then skill kicks in and can raise that up so you can become an order taker, then a salesperson, and then a closer, and then a master closer. And people think, okay, well, that's it. No, the ones who make the most money, whether they've heard the term or not, are sales infiltrators. It puts you in a class that other people, many are not even aware exists, and at an income level that many people don't believe they can achieve. I mentioned this for some other reason last week, I think, where the golf pro said one day, a reporter, someone said to a golf pro, what did he think of Jack Nicklaus, the way he plays golf? And the pro said, Nicklaus doesn't play golf. The rest of us play golf. He plays something different. And that's what people will say about you when you're a sales infiltrator. You know, I've had people say of me, he used to be a master closer. And somebody said, well, did he lose it? He said, no, he went on to sales infiltrator. He doesn't play the same game we play anymore.
Right, right.
And that's true of all of the great master closers slash sales infiltrators I've worked with over the years. They play, there's something else going on. It's not, here's my widget. Do you want it in red or blue? Alternate choice close. You want it today or tomorrow? Getting urgent. The sale ends Friday. You got to act now. All that stuff. When you're watching a sales infiltrator, he or she is just talking to a person. The conversation has a direction to it, but you won't, as Cary Grant, the old actor, said, secret of acting was not to get caught at it. The secret of selling or closing is to not get caught at it, and sales infiltrators don't get caught at it. He didn't consider himself a salesman, which is part of his secret. But Earl Nightingale became the most listened to radio voice in the world in his time, heard daily on over 700 radio stations in the United States and Canada. Well, he's the one who sold most of those stations on carrying his show. It was called Our Changing World. And this came upon me today while we're talking during this conversation. I've never really thought of Earl as a salesperson or as a master closer or as a sales infiltrator, but that's what he was a sales infiltrator. When Earl Nightingale started talking, he was blessed with a wonderful voice. You felt like God was talking to you. And we were his largest customer by far. We once placed an order with Nightingale Conant that literally saved their company. They were not Earl, but one of his people were putting a little heat on us. Let's get this order placed. I said, we've agreed to it. You're going to be the training program for Holiday Magic Cosmetics, Stay Power Motor Oil Additives, Bob Cummings Vitamin, Ameriprise Home Care Cleaning Products. It's and our clothing company, tailoring company. You're in. As agreed, we're placing the order in June. I'm making up a month. I don't remember when it was, but that was 4 or 5 months out. And the vice president of sales said, Ben, if you don't order now, we won't be here in June.
Well, at
They
least he
they
was
were down
frank
to
about it.
they were down to the short strokes at that point.
Oh,
But through it all, Earl to me was a friend and a confidant and a mentor. I've never thought about him selling me anything, but we spent and became the largest customer Nightingale Conant ever had. We spent millions of dollars with him because Earl Nightingale infiltrated me. And it started early because when I joined Holiday Magic as a young man, 23, I think I was at the time, the gentleman who recruited me, Bill Dempsey, handed me two things. A recording, an old beat up, scratched up record. It's right here on my desk of The Strangest Secret by Earl Nightingale, and a beat up copy of Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill's great book. And he said, you're young, you're inexperienced. I don't have time to baby you. So go home and listen to this over and over and over again and read this book over and over and over again. People have asked me, including Earl and Dr. Hill, well, did it work? And they asked me that one night at the house in Marin County. And I said, well, look around. What do you think? We're sitting in one of the biggest houses in Marin County, overlooking San Francisco Bay, surrounded by 156 acres of pasture land. And it all came from joining that company that day and being handed Earl's record and Dr. Hill's book. So yeah, it works if you do it. And sales infiltrators do it all the time. I don't remember Earl. I don't think I ever signed an order in front of him. It was, we're going to do this. Okay, fine. Let's go to lunch. And when I came back, the paperwork was ready and somebody else presented it to me. He was uh, not standoffish, but an invisible hand in the sales process. He nailed sales infiltration perfectly.
Tell us the story, and I'll never forget this story. We talked about it, I don't know how many episodes back, where Earl thought he was through recording and you guys pressed a whole bunch of records and then all hell broke loose.
You want to hear the story again?
I do. I
It,
love that
it
story.
was the Beltone hearing aid Christmas recording, and it was on what they call flexi records. It came in a cardboard folder, about half the size of a normal magazine, and in it was a piece of plastic which had a pressed record on it. So you could send it out in a magazine, bound in a magazine, tear it out, fold it back, and play it. They were just amazing and a new thing. So they were trying to sell me and did on creating some flexi records that our people could hand out. One was called an invitation to success. You don't have the nerve to ask them to come to a meeting, hand them this, and Earl would invite them to the meeting. You just had to go pick them up. And there was a post-sell recording called The General Idea and a couple others. Anyway, 4 flexi records they were proposing. I said, well, I don't know, because it was new. I've never heard of that. And do they really play? And they said, yeah. One sales manager said to the other one, go get one of those recordings out there. They're in the hall. Well, in the hall was 10,000 pre-addressed, pre-postaged, if that's a word, 10,000 flexi records. That was the Beltone hearing aid Christmas message from the voice of Beltone, Earl Nightingale. So he pulled one out of the pack, that waiting for the post office, I guess, to come and pick all this stuff up, brought it in the conference room, put it down on the table, folded it back, stuck it on a record player, and there came the magical voice. Hello, this is Earl Nightingale with Beltone hearing aids, wishing you a Merry Christmas and so on. Well, when they first presented it to Earl, he said, I'm not reading this. It's hokey and crappy. I'll rewrite it. So they went back and said, Earl wants to rewrite it. And the head of Beltone apparently sent word back that I wrote it, and that's exactly the way I want it done. And so Earl told his partner, Lloyd Conant, well, I'm not doing it. And Lloyd told Earl, you'll do it or we lose the account and we'll be out of business. So you're going to record it. So Earl reluctantly goes into the recording studio with his sound engineer who'd been with him for years and was with him, I think, till his death. He moved to Arizona with him when Earl semi-retired, so he could still do work for him. And Earl was a cold copy reader, one read. He'd hand him a piece of paper and he'd read it as if he had written it, even if it was the first time he ever saw it. So the engineer had gotten sort of sloppy, and when Earl quit talking, he hit the disconnect button and sent it off to the pressing company to have the records. Back in those days, there were records prior to the cassettes. Send it off to the pressing company, and that's what happened with these Beltone hearing aids. So I'm listening to it, and I could sort of see why Earl didn't want to do it. Yuletide greetings to you and yours. May the snowflakes dance through your family. It was hard. it was hardly Earl, who was a very serious, erudite person. And down near the end, I'm listening to it. I'm very impressed, and I've made up my mind we're going to do them. And down near the end, he said, "Again, this is Earl Nightingale with bell tone hearing aids, wishing you a wonderful Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year." Pause. Jesus Christ, what a crock of shit.
That's where I lose it every time. I knew it was coming and I was already
Yeah,
laughing.
and Les or Ron Davis, no relation, but they had the same last name. They were the two VPs of sales. One of them threw his body over the record player, like that would make me unhear that, and would make the 10,000 copies out in the hallway uh, be right. And then he realized that wasn't going to work. So he ran outside and they formed the two of them a human wall. So the postal service couldn't go away with the 10,000 copies. And meanwhile, I'm sitting alone in the office with my briefcase open and that recording, the one they pulled out of the pile, spinning around on the record player. So I picked it up and threw it in my briefcase. Months later, I think, we're having dinner somewhere, the Nightingale Conant gang and some of my people, and Earl tells the story, which by then he thought was very funny. He said, "Fortunately, thanks to Wes and Ron, uh, we got all the recordings, and two or three people knew, and they slowly turned to me, and I said, except for one."
One.
He said, "You got," I said, "Yeah, I took the sample they played for me. I wanted to take it home and make sure that the sound was as good as I thought." He said, "You son of a," you know? And I said, "Earl, if I'm ever really short on money, I want you to know you can buy it back." But now
And
that
it
he's
won't
dead, I
cost you
tell the
much.
story.
Yeah,
Huh?
it won't cost much, just $1 million.
Yeah. Jesus Christ, what a crock of shit on 10,000 recordings.
See, and this goes back to what you said a little bit ago. Don't get don't get in your head that this person is so important. They're such a hero. They're such. They're a person, and we're all people. And some of us well, some of us, all of us make mistakes. Good ones, big ones, really big ones. We all make mistakes. Just go with it. They're people. Okay, did I lose you?
I lost you for a moment.
Oh, I wonder what
It was
happened.
at the people.
They're just people. What I was going to say, and I'll have to cut this out if I can. What I was going to say is that it goes back to what you were talking about earlier about don't getting awestruck or worried when you're interviewing somebody or trying to sell something to somebody who has a big, big presence. They're people. They're people just like us.
Yep. And sometimes I know something. Being a sales infiltrator, I can get out of people in a casual conversation. It's automatic. I'm not trying to, it just happens. I can get them to tell me things that they probably shouldn't have. They're in safe hands because I don't rat them out until they die. And then if it makes a good story, I've
Good
been
to
known to
know.
rat out a few people here and there. But
Oh, no. I'm safe because your wife still loves me. So keep that in mind.
but there are people in the speaking industry, for instance, who I've walked into rooms, they've looked up, we've locked eyes, and he turned around and left. And it's not like we had a problem between us, but what it is they know that I know. I know who's who, what's what, and where the bodies are buried. I know who's really sold stuff and who just figured out it was easier to talk about selling stuff than to sell it. They fear rejection to the point they almost can't stand it. They've given in and go, okay, I won't sell. I'll work for standing ovations. But those of us who've been around a while know that the stories they're telling aren't true. They never sold anything. Here's one of the great teachers of all time, taught me, taught Jimmy Rucker, the greatest salesman I ever personally worked with. And I wrote a book for his family after he died called Sales Closing Power by J. Douglas Edwards. This doesn't take away from anything in the book that he said, wrote, told me about personally, nothing. He was magnificent in training other people. But in working with him for, I'm guessing, I don't remember the day I met him or the day we parted, but in working with him, I'm going to say 15, 20 years, I never could pin down what it was he sold in his past. He talked about insurance from time to time. I sort of thought it was that, but then he talked about real estate, and then that would fade away. I couldn't get particulars out of him. What he was a great teacher. Is the old saying, those who can do, those who can't teach. Uh, but that doesn't mean that they're not good teachers or don't have great value. I took a business class from a guy and used some of the things he taught me today, and he taught me in high school. I mean, that goes back a long time ago. And I wasn't bright enough to say to myself, if he's teaching business, why is he teaching business in a public high school?
Good
Because he didn't
question.
want to start a business. He was
Right,
afraid to
right.
start a business. When someone is teaching a salesmanship class, check their credentials. They may be doing it as a favor. I've given probably 5,000 paid engagement speeches, keynotes, seminars, etc. But I've given another 5,000, especially in the early days, free to prisons and schools and churches and so on. So it doesn't mean that free stuff isn't valuable. It can be, but check your references. Some people have zero idea what they're talking about. One, I'm not going to mention his name. I'll mention him some other time for different reasons, but one of the people who's a guru, now passed away, a guru in the sales business and in the personal development business and so on. He worked for me. He never sold anything to anybody ever. And he's one of those people who's not thrilled to see me in a room because he liked to. And then I did this, and then I rose to the top of that, and I walk in the back of the room. He goes, "Uh-oh." He knows everything I'm saying is not true.
Oh,
But
I think
if
I
you
know who it is.
don't say it, if you study the material and learn how to be a sales infiltrator in result, an unconscious competent, you do what's right without having to think about it. It has become part of you. It has infiltrated your brain and your heart and your soul. When you get to that level, you are home free. There is no, my son, one of my sons, I have four. One of my sons said it too early in his career, but nevertheless, it's true. They were going up to Alaska to do that thing where the young boys go to Alaska, get on a fishing boat, and get rich by September. Never happens, but it's a great theory and a good excuse to go do something exciting. I heard the story later. They were at my sister's house in Atlanta, 8 or 9 of them, plotting their trip, and young Ben is watching a football game or something on television. And finally, his aunt, my sister, says, "Benjamin, you're not paying attention to what they're doing. This is how you're going to spend the summer in Alaska, 3, 4 months." And he turned around, she told me later, and says, "Aunt Jane, my father raised me to be a salesman. They can pick any spot on earth and I'll be employed by sundown."
Oh,
And that was his attitude. And I won't
yeah.
bore you with the whole story, but fascinating story came out of that because that's what happened. He got them all hired in one place after they got to Alaska. And he didn't have to go out on a fishing boat. He stayed in port and ran supplies out to the fishing boats, about a 20-minute trip each way. But every night he was in a nice restaurant or bar having a wonderful time because he knew how to sell their way into the situation. He was a sort of a natural sales infiltrator. So if you read, boys and girls, if you read nothing else about selling, I've got 35 books out there that I've written, co-written, edited, and or published. So there's lots of stuff I hope you get, and all of it has great value. But if you read nothing else about selling the rest of your life, once a month, read Sales Infiltration in the Closers Part 2, starts on page 257, and it's worth just about everything else total.
It really is. And I think I was complaining, not bitterly, but soon last week that my binding has the threads are broken and I have to get some tape, some book tape. And I'm like, well, I've had this book for years and it's just now falling apart. But guess where it's falling apart? Page 262. So
Right.
that's exactly what you're talking about. And I
And
wanted to, and I had made a note, I have a sticky note, sales counselors. I think we haven't talked about that before. So what is a sales counselor?
well, it's part of being a sales infiltrator, but the term sort of comes from the Wilson Learning Corporation in Minneapolis. I'm not sure they're still in business, but that used to be Larry Wilson's company, and Larry was close to my age, but more experienced than I was. He was one of my mentors also, and he used to teach selling and among other things, but primarily selling was his bailiwick. And he came up with the term counselor selling. And it was sort of a step towards sales infiltration in that it's not, hey, I tell you what I'm going to do in the price. And if you order by Friday, you get one extra, so on the way many salespeople are pictured and the way some salespeople still operate. He said, you're a counselor. You're,
Oh, I get it now. Okay, keep
yeah, you're helping someone solve a problem, which is a big part of sales infiltration. My ear doctor just called this, or one of his people called this morning to move an appointment up uh, almost by a month. And I said, what's going on? And she said, the lady said, well, he's on vacation. So I'm supposed to adjust my life so he can go on vacation. You got to be kidding me. And she laughed and said, they warned me about you. she, she, she wasn't taking me seriously.
Oh,
But the
good.
reason I just thought of Dr. Evans is because of what you said. I went to him, I guess probably the first time, and this upcoming time will be the third time. And I have dry skin and itch. Uh, I have to sometimes in meetings say, do not scratch your arm again, or don't do that. I've had it my whole life, that and hay fever. And so I go to Dr. Evans and he looks in my ears and pokes around and pulls out uh, some remnants of a Q-tip, the cloth, the cotton stuff, because I cleaned my ears with Q-tips every day and sometimes twice a day my whole life.
And you're not
And
supposed to do that. Even I know that.
yeah, well, I heard that all the time. The lady who sold me my hearing aids, I said, how do you clean your ears? She said, Q-tips, but I'm not supposed to, and you're not
No.
supposed to either. And I said, yeah, fine. I think I'll stick to my program, which I did. I go to Evans. He pulls this Q-tip out of my ear. And here's counselor selling. There's the reason I'm telling you this. And assumptive selling. I'm forever telling people, be like a doctor. Doctor asks questions, if you have a good one, listens carefully, writes down your answers, and when it's over, gives you a few pieces of advice and a prescription. Go get this. Nobody ever says, well, I'm not going to go get that, and so on.
I do.
He's,
Sorry. I have been
well,
known
you're
to go,
one of the few.
no prescriptions for me. I'll find another way. Thank you.
You're, as we all know, unusual. But anyway,
Pig-headed, I think is the word you were looking for, but thank you.
the uh, the point is operating from a position of authority, and they got the certificates hanging on the wall, and you paid to go to get his advice. Most people do it. I don't think I've ever not done it. Now, after I've taken something, it didn't react well, I might stop taking it and not get any refills, but I'm a little different than you are. But when Dr. Evans pulled this thing, he said, do you use Q-tips? And I almost lied because I knew the lecture that was probably going to come. I said, yeah, occasionally, twice a day, both ears. And he said, well, now listen to this. This is sales infiltration. He said, I own your ears now. You're not going to use Q-tips anymore. And if I see any sign of you using Q-tips, you'll have to get yourself a new doctor. And I said, oh, okay. He had infiltrated me. He now owns my ears. And took over. Daddy's going to take me flying. And
Right.
I'm sort of disappointed that they had to move the appointment up about a month into August from when it was originally scheduled, because I look forward to going to him to get sound advice. He's selling from a position of authority, and he's a sales infiltrator. We kidded and I said to him one time, you're funny. And he said, no, you're the funny one, but I enjoy being around you. And I sort of puffed up inside. He'd
Yeah.
infiltrated me again. And if I told him he'd make a great salesperson and probably make more money, he would argue with me because he's a doctor.
You never know how people are going to impact you, whether they're talking with you or they're infiltrating you or you're listening to them. You've never met them, but you're listening to them or reading them. There's always a point of impact with every interaction we have. It
Yep.
could be ooh, or it could be ooh, or something in between. But we all have impact. Now, how you show up that's up to you. I
Yep.
suggest you do it the best way you can.
I'm forever telling doctors, I don't go to that many, but the hearing guy and my general doctor, my real doctor, for instance, they'll say, well, what do you think? And I say, it's not important what I think. I said, are you familiar with Emory University Hospital in Atlanta? Oh, yes, of course. I said, well, I've driven past it twice. So, see, I come here because you have the certificate on the wall. We
Right.
don't need my opinion other than, does it hurt when I do this? Beyond that, I'm not really interested. But you've got to infiltrate me for me to have that. Dr. Galang, my main doctor, is a saint to me and my family and to almost everybody in town who's lucky enough to get him. Uh, he truly cares. He truly listens, and he's smart as hell. Gigi was out with a good friend of hers who just retired from the hospital after 30 some odd years as the chief charge nurse. I assume that means top dog. I'm not sure what a charge nurse is, but somehow in conversation, Galang's name came up, and Jetty is her name. Jetty said, I was talking to a bunch of nurses one day at a social gathering, and we came to the joint conclusion that Dr. Gerald Galang is the smartest doctor any of us have ever met. But he doesn't laud that. He's a sales infiltrator. He doesn't know, he's never heard that term, but he's a sales infiltrator. I would trust him with my life, and to a degree do. I mean, if something bad happened, a decision had to be made, he's the man I would go to. When my mother-in-law was dying, uh, and we were to the point where she was dying. I mean, you pray and you hope, and there's miracle recoveries. But this was near the end, and it was time to send her home for hospice care. Uh, he said, took me and Gigi out in the hallway, said, here's the deal. Do you want me to tell her, or do you want to tell her? I said, you wouldn't mind doing that? We'll be with you, but you won't mind doing that? He said, I've done it many, many times. He went in, pulled up a chair, sat down beside the bed. Pardon me while I choke up a little bit. Took both of her hands and said, Lorna, we're at the end. You're going to die. And she said, coming from you, that sounds like good news.
Oh, oh, now I'm
And
gonna cry.
that caring, compassionate person, that may be a little over dramatic for selling a widget to somebody, but when they can sense that you care about them. You know, the motto in the Closers Part 1 and of the National Association of Professional Salespeople is sum tertius. I am third. And that comes from, in the Closers Part 1, my God first, the other fellow second, I am third. Sales infiltrators, whether they've ever heard that phrase or not, know that they are third in the relationship. And when the customer feels that way, they'll buy and start building the bond, because of the phrase I coined years ago. People like to buy from people they know, like, trust, and with whom they feel safe. And that's what a sales infiltrator is. They infiltrate, they know what they're doing, they know the ways they could do it, but they don't. They have a smoother way. As I told you, I sort of created sales infiltration, or gave it a name, when I figured out early in my sales career that I was a Southern gentleman. I was too polite to do some of the things I was being told to do. I couldn't do it. If that's what I had to do in selling, then I wouldn't be there. I've told this story to your folks many times. Kirby Vacuum Cleaner and I have had a running battle because they jokingly, some of them jokingly, some of them seriously, say the sales presentation is not complete until you have payment in your hand or the police have been called. Well, I didn't want the police to be called. I didn't want to have an awkward moment. So I figured out a way by studying the greats, and I've worked with some of the greatest people that ever lived in the field of sales and personal development. If they're still alive, they're personal friends. Most of them worked for me at one time or other. And we developed, consciously or unconsciously, a way not to be asked to leave the house or the office, not to be thrown out, to be considered a friend, to be invited to. I love it when somebody I didn't know 30 days ago invites me to a family wedding or a
Oh,
funeral, or I'm
oh,
on the list of people, God forbid somebody dies, I'm on the list of people you call to tell
yeah,
them they've died. One of my dear friends, Ray Considine, you have his book,
I
Wamish.
do.
Why are you
Thank
making
you.
this hard for me to give you my money? Um, his son, who I think I knew, I believe I'd met him a couple of times, and I certainly knew of him through Ray. One day he called and he said, Ben, this is Chris Considine. I said, I'm not going to like this call, am I? And he said, no, I was on the list of people you call when Ray dies. And so I got that call. I had a similar experience with a sales infiltrator named Phil Gage, who was my father's insurance broker. He was with Massachusetts Mutual, and I was told from the time, 12, 13 up, if anything happens to me, go to my top left-hand drawer. You'll find a sheet of paper, do what it says. So he died suddenly at work one day, 48 years ago, a couple of days ago. And I got the call. And so then I flew back to Atlanta and I started making the calls. I went to the desk drawer. Number one, call Phil Gage. And I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was similar to, I said, Phil, this is Ben Gay, the third, as people call me, Little Ben, used to call me Little Ben. And he said something like, I'm not going to like this call, am I? I said, no. How'd you know? He said, because he said, you just opened your father's left-hand drawer
God.
and you're starting down the list. He met me at the funeral home, went back to the house, picked out Dad's suit, uh, did all the things you do. I was with him, but I'd never been through that before. Did all the things you do when somebody passes away, and took his insurance papers, and the checks started arriving. There were 8 or 9 of things that when Dad died, he had to, they had to pay him something, pensions, whatever. And then as I was getting ready to leave, about 10 days later, Phil called and said, how's it going? And I said, everything's going fine. Mom is working away through this. And I said, Phil, I don't want to turn this into a business call, but the only check that I was expecting that I haven't gotten is from Mass Mutual. And he said, Ben, your father hasn't had a policy with me for years. And he said, that list you're working off of, I helped him prepare when he bought. But over time, your sister grew up, got married, moved away, and so on. He didn't need the big policy, which was mine. So we canceled that some years ago. I said, you should have said something. He said, why?
He was there for
So,
you and your dad. And
yeah,
your,
he said that I probably sold as much insurance for him as anyone other than himself, because I told that story until he retired and then died all over the world. And people say, what's his phone number?
right, right.
They
And,
all wanted somebody like Phil Gage, the ultimate sales infiltrator, although I was years away from coming up with the term.
and we should all grow up to be that.
Hmm.
Okay, now I'm crying and we're out of time. Seriously, I'm wearing my old ratty t-shirt because I was outside this morning trying to move branches again and I hadn't changed it yet. And now I keep raising it up to wipe my eyes. So now I have to go change my shirt.
Tears and mascara.
No mascara. I didn't, if I'm gonna look, it is hot as hell here right now. Literally, I'm in the deep south. It's like living in the armpit, Satan's armpit right now. It's so humid. So there's no mascara. There's no pantyhose. There's no nothing. It's,
Satan's, to our listeners, I just like to clarify that Satan's armpit is a medical term.
is it really?
Yeah, I picked that up at Emory University when I drove past.
Oh, I don't even want, that's for another conversation. But I wanted to mention a couple of things now that I've wiped my eyes. I couldn't wipe my eyes on the cat because he left when I was laughing too much. Normally I just pick him up and go, oh. But you talked about Ronzoni books and the closers are over there, and you're gonna think I'm a total idiot, and you're welcome to. But every once in a while I'll go look at Ronzoni books and I know my book is not there because it's not published yet. It will be soon, but I keep going, I wonder if my book's there. I mean, it's like I'm
Save a place.
manifesting. Yeah. Save me a spot. I'm manifesting. But, I can't tell you the day I see my book up there, I'm going to be doing my happy dance all over the place.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. And I have a little one of those portable book things, where you stick them on each end of the stack and then it sits on the books, the bookends.
Yeah.
And there's a slight gap between closers. One, and by and large, the books that are there are mine, or I had a hand in them. And it's closers 1, 2, 3, and then there's a little gap, like there's a book missing, and then closers 5, and the little gap is where your book is going. Can't wait to read it and put it there.
Well, I have been writing like a crazy person. I think I shared with you that I've been getting up at 4:30, 5 o'clock, and I'm writing and I'm loving it. And if you would have told me a year ago that I was going to write this particular book, I would have gone, no, 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 no. Right now, I mean, my mom used to say when I would wake up, she'd say, oh, geez, her feet just hit the floor and the devil is going, oh, geez, oh, geez, oh, geez. But I, she wasn't far wrong. But I hit the floor and I come straight into here. I do, I go out with the dog for a little bit, but then I'm in here and I'm writing for 2 or 3 hours. I'm writing the book, I'm writing blogs, but I'm writing more now than I ever have. And I'm finding it very exciting. So thank you.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to have you in our family, and it's an honor to be in yours.
I know it is. Well, listen, what are we going to cover? And thank you. What are we going to cover next week? Are we going to stay in sales infiltration? Because I think we've still
Absolutely.
got a ways to go.
Yeah, we'll just pick up about where we are now, 263 or something like that. I'll
63.
read a little bit before we get on, and then we'll talk about whatever struck me.
Okay, good. Well, listen, Ben has already told you where you can find the books at the top of the show, and we need to do that going forward from now on. And you can find him, well, Ben, tell us very quickly about your mentoring. Is that
Well, I don't have any openings right now, but when
okay?
I do, what I do for a small group of people, 30-ish people, is I do for them what Dr. Hill did for me when he was hired to be my mentor and friend. They had to buy friends for me back in those days. Uh, so I just try and pass on everything that Dr. Hill taught me and what I've learned in the meantime. The Chinese or somebody has a saying, if you want to know what's further down the path, ask someone who's coming back up the path. Well,
Kind of
I've
like the
I've been
serpents,
down the path. I've been in
yeah,
the deep woods. I've
exactly.
seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, extreme success, extreme failure, and I made lots of notes along the way. So that's what I try and pass on. And if anyone's interested or wants to get on the list, uh, shoot me an email with mentoring somewhere in it. Subject line would be a good idea. And send that to B as in Ben, F as in Frank, G as in gay, the numeral 3, BFG3 at DirectCon, short for Direct Connect, DirectCon.net. And I'll acknowledge it and tell you you're on the list. And then when there's an opening, I'll tell everybody. And if you're really on the list, first come, first serve.
Well, that makes sense. And we do, we opened with a question this morning. Listen, everybody, we love to answer your questions. We might even make sense when we answer them. So send them to us. We'll try. Send them to us and we will answer them on, out loud online on the show. So we're easy to find. Ben's already told you how to find him. I'm easy to find online. I'm everywhere. And you can't throw a stick on your partner in success radio without hitting us. Or you can call me directly toll free at 888-719-6711. Leave a message and I'll return your call just as quickly as possible. And you can find us again on yourpartnerinsuccessradio.com. So thank you everyone for joining us and be sure to find us. Look for our names, look for the Closers Inner Circle podcast, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Ben, thank you.
Thank you. You have a wonderful week.
You too. Talk to you next time.